Oh, I thought I was gonna remix it, and no, it didn't work.
Moment's gone. Hey, everybody, and welcome to Depression Vacation Podcast. This is episode 46, despite 46 episodes apparently not being available.
Rude.
Yeah, on our Spotify thing, which is something we have to figure out. But
get the pitchforks, get the torches. We're storming Spotify.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't say that.
I mean, I would if I knew where Spotify was, but I think it's literally in the cloud, so...
They live in the clouds?
Maybe.
Oh my god.
Possibly. Probably.
It's like Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, we haven't talked a lot about Tears of the Kingdom after talking about every episode for like 2 months. But I definitely have hit a bit of a plateau with it where I had just, what was it? I have all but 12 of the shrines at this point, and I finally figured out how to get the Gerudo temple.
Nice.
Because that took me a while to figure out. And then as I was trying to find a way into it, I've kind of stopped playing it for a little bit. So I should go back to that.
Yeah, I was playing a little bit this week and unlocked more of the depths kind of accidentally.
Yeah.
Because I was looking for Pose because I needed enough Pose to get the Dark Hood from one of the Bargainer statues, which I don't even know what the Dark set does, but I'm really trying to get the last piece of the Depths set so that I can go through there without having to fucking lose my mind over gloom. So
I think the depths are the most fascinating part of the entire the area. About a month ago, I went on a quest and it took me like an entire week, but I haven't gotten all of the light roots because they overlap, but I got enough of them that the entire depths are illuminated. And the Pose, I was really disappointed in what you could buy with the Pose when I finally, because I was collecting I had like 1,500 of them by the time I found out that I could actually exchange them for things. And then I got the Dark Hood, but also I'm like, I guess I have an endless supply of bombs now, but that's kind of it.
Well, did you get the Depths set too?
I don't know. Maybe.
You have to find all the Bargainer statues, and then you can
get
so
there's different Bargainer statues. Okay.
Yeah, so there's...
Thank you.
They're like all over the map, and there's a set of armor you can get that gives you gloom resistance.
Oh, I really need that too because I've been mostly pummeling through all of the gloom areas, but I don't know if you found this in the depths yet, but there is a Colosseum down there where you have to fight. It's at least 3 gloom Lionels in a row because I beat one pretty easily the first time I went down there, and then there was a second one. I'm like, well, fuck, this is gonna suck. And after a lot of trying, and I finally got the fairies, so I improved my armor enough that I could beat the second one, and then a third one popped out, and I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna. And what they do is they inflict only gloom damage, so you can't actually recover any of your health by spamming like health and food things. So
unless you make a bunch of Sundelion foods.
Yeah, I don't have enough Sundelions.
Yeah.
The depths I thought were actually the most for a game that really hyped the Sky Islands, which are not a huge part of the game and very frustrating to try to get to.
Oh my God.
I think the depths were actually the more interesting, although it was really frustrating to try to get to certain light routes because you could never see like how high a wall was or if you had any legitimate chance of actually climbing it with your stamina.
Yeah. Cool. We got in our Legend of Zelda for
I know, I
this
could talk
episode.
about this game for hours, honestly.
Yeah.
A quick question before we get away from it, though. At this point in the juncture, what did you like better, Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild?
That's a really good question. I think that I like them both equally. So Breath of the Wild for me was like the pinnacle of video gaming because I'd never won a game before, like finished a video game before. So it was the first video game I've ever, because it's
a good one to finish.
I'm not a gamer kind of person. I don't spend a lot of time playing video games. So it's the game that I've easily spent the most time on other than Animal Crossing.
But Animal Crossing and those games are not games that are meant to be completed.
No, you can't win Animal Crossing.
It's just like I've spent more time in Hearthstone than any other game by far, but it's not a game designed to ever end.
Yeah. So for that, Breath of the Wild will always have a special place in my heart. But what I love about Tears of the Kingdom is that they fixed some of the things I didn't like about Breath of the Wild. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to say they made it easier, but let me tell you, Breath of the Wild was so hard for me. So I don't know if it's that they made it easier or that I just got better at the game.
They made certain aspects more accessible. Like, if I was actually thinking, if I went back and played Breath of the Wild now, like not being able to shoot up through ceilings would be a huge thing for me.
But I still miss Rivali's Gale. I still miss it.
Yeah. The bombs were something that I did not like at first in Tears of the Kingdom because they were consumable items as opposed to, and also you could only use magnesis. That would be another thing that would kill me.
All of them were timed.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So like you can't detonate it at your own discretion, which was how I managed to beat the Moldugas in Breath of the Wild was, being sneaky.
Yeah, you had to. I looked that up because I didn't beat a lot of them, but you had to make them swallow bombs and blow them up, which is true to how you would beat them in the original first Zelda. So in fact, but they don't look any. The funny thing is, like the Moldugas in the first Zelda did not look anything like what happened in Breath of the Wild. They looked like Triceratopses, actually.
Well, is it just me? Because I haven't looked at them side by side, but do the Moldugas in Tears of the Kingdom look terribly different from Breath of the Wild?
Haven't really encountered them that much.
Okay. I think they look super different, but that might just be me having fake memories about Breath of the Wild.
Possibly. All right. So Breath of the Wild and Zelda talk is over.
Okay.
Because
we got it in.
We did, and I'm feeling pretty good this week overall for a lot of reasons, but one of the main ones is like this week was the fucking hottest week of the entire year. Like every day was 93, I think, or above. It was horrible. And it finally, I think, has broken a little bit.
I know. I'm so ready for fall.
Yeah.
My basic white girl is flourishing, and which is another reason. We were just talking before we started recording that Hal's been super into the cold brew, but I have to have my warm comfort drink every day.
Yeah.
And that's the white girl in me that doesn't die throughout the year. I carry the spirit of fall through the entire year with me.
Lauren and I were actually just talking about this yesterday because she said something similar. She was like, I am always in the mood for fall. And I'm like, me too, but it only manifests one time a year.
I've always been a summer person until it got fucking hot. Like really fucking hot. My perfect day is like 70 and like gorgeously sunny.
Yeah.
Which usually you get in the summer, but this summer and last summer and the summer before were absurdly hot, and you couldn't enjoy anything.
It's Hal didn't mute his phone.
Oh my god! And then
stupid Hal.
Oh my god! I don't think I did either.
And it was just an email. It wasn't even somebody telling me they loved me.
Oh man, I'm sorry, Hal.
Google, help strengthen the security of your podcast. Wow, that was completely unnecessary.
Listen, this thing, what do we need to protect about this thing? I don't know.
But yeah, this is, funny enough, like, as will surprise nobody since my dad is a very public climate denier. My parents always keep claiming that summers were a lot hotter when they were kids. And I was actually like, well, we'll look up the hottest days of the summer in like the 1960s. And my mom did. And she was surprised to find out like that there were only 3 days above 90 degrees in 62, which was the day that she was looking at. There were a lot of 80 days, but the humidity was also pretty low. Mm-hmm. And it's just one of those things where it's like, you remember it being hotter than it was because air conditioning wasn't as readily available. And I don't know. It fits the narrative of what you're doing. But
well, and also I think like we as kids overinflate things sometimes. Like when the feelings that we felt when we were kids are amplified.
That's an interesting thought, yeah.
Because you've never felt those things before, so you only have one frame of reference, I think.
Yeah, one of the things I've been seeking to find my entire adult life is the way that the excitement I would feel for Christmas Eve, particularly. But like none of like Christmas Eve are not particularly exciting holidays for me anymore. Mostly because I have to work I'd say like every other year I have to work both of them. But
the appeal of Christmas Eve for me died probably around the age of 9, which is probably super early.
That is really early.
Well, that's probably, trauma, but
yeah.
No big deal.
That's when I found out there was no Santa Claus, but there was still a lot of Christmas love for years afterwards.
Well, and the funny thing is, I don't think mine had anything to do with losing Santa Claus, because actually, I think I had a steadfast belief in Santa Claus until about 6th grade.
Oh, okay.
I kept it.
You were a true believer.
I know, I kept it secret, but but I was a weird kid all around, so we don't worry about that.
Same.
But I think for me, it had a lot to do with when I was really little. Like there was a lot of excitement for me because, like, I guess my parents were still together and maybe they still made an effort. But like once my parents split up, like it just never was consistent after that. Sometimes we had Christmas Eve where it was just me, my mom, and my brother.
Yeah.
And like there wasn't the same kind of magic. Or we'd do it with my grandparents, and that had a little bit of magic with it. But yeah, it died pretty early on for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. You were still in 6th grade because like you found out there was no Santa Claus because.
So it wasn't that. Let me tell you.
You just kept believing.
Yeah, I kept believing. My mom, when I was around 9, wrote me a letter, and because I asked her, like, is Santa Claus real? And she, like, wrote me a letter instead of sitting me down and talking to me like a normal person. And she was like, you know, the spirit of Santa is, you know, something that parents carry, you know, or, you know, she tried to explain it the best that she has the capability to.
Yeah.
And even after that letter, I was like, this bitch don't know what she's talking about. And I was like, but I also, my thing that happened when I was really young is that because there was so much fantasy involved, I believed in a lot of things. Like, I figured if all the things my mom was saying and all the things that I learned at church were all real, then like everything had to be real. So I like firmly believed in Peter Pan for a really long time. And I kept trying to like lure him to our house and like set up little traps for him.
Capture his shadow.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, that's the thing though. When everybody talks about their childhoods, like I don't have anything cookie cutter to share.
Yeah. There's no frame of reference that's necessarily equal to another person's frame of reference.
No.
I mean, my only funny story is that like Calvin and Hobbes was the thing that taught me there was no Santa Claus. Because there's a lot of Calvin and Hobbes comics where they sort of play around with the fact that like Calvin is upstairs listening to what he thinks is Santa downstairs, and it's really his dad. Yeah. And so like I basically bluffed my parents into telling me there was no Santa Claus because I told them I know the truth about Santa, which I wasn't sure about at that point. And then they loved telling this story because they were like, you know, there's no Santa. And my response was, I do now.
That's like, great.
I bluffed myself out of the See, Santa Claus is an interesting concept to me because if I had children, I wouldn't do it. And interestingly enough, the best conversation I ever had about this came from when I was in the Catholic club in college, the Newman Club, and their discussion was a little bit more religious based, but there were a lot of good points. Specifically, one of the guys brought up something that's always stuck with me is that like, what am I trying to say?
You got this. I believe in you.
Oh, my head.
Guys, I wish you could see this happen in real time. It's really heartbreaking. I'm sorry.
Just trying to find the right way to put this. It's heartbreaking watching Hal's brain explode over the radio.
It hurts for my friend.
And you're the only one who can see it because this is a podcast. Anyway, what he was saying was that it sort of conditions you to not believe things that your parents say. Like it's a big foundational lie, essentially, that your parents are telling you for not only for no like gain of their own, but also for like, you know, they're the ones who are providing you all this love and these presents and these sweet things. And they're not only not taking credit for it, but they're using lies essentially under the guise of, I've never understood why people thought Santa Claus was fun once I was like over it, because like there's really no net gain to doing something like that unless you really want to make kids think it's magical. But then eventually they'll find out and it just hurts, essentially.
Right. Well, I think that's interesting because going back to what you were saying, like from a religious context, it teaches kids that their parents lie to them and not to believe what their parents tell them.
Yes.
And I think that's interesting because in a religious context, it's like, well, your parents are the ones who are teaching you about religion.
Yes.
So if they see Santa Claus as a lie, they're going to start wondering what else was a lie.
This is why this was a big Catholic club discussion.
And that's interesting because from the age of 12 on, a lot of my conversations that you would probably have in like a youth group or a Catholic club or something, I had with atheists. And so atheists have a similar beef with Santa Claus because it's like it teaches kids.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, right. You know, it's saying like your parents are lying to you. And I mean, what I always heard around the atheist circles was like Santa is training wheels for religion, training wheels for believing in Jesus because you know they're basically the same thing. And so I think that's really interesting that they both had the same beef, but in different contexts.
It's the only show I can think of that actually hit the nail on the head with this was South Park. And there was one episode, it was like a Tooth Fairy episode, where Cartman, like his whole gambit when he lost his first tooth and realized he was making money was to just take all these other kids' teeth, he would, and get money. And then eventually his mom was going broke from keeping the lie alive. And so she was like, she had to tell him the truth. And Cartman's like, oh, what are you going to tell me next? That there's no Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, or Jesus either? And being a religious person at that point in my life, I'm like, wow, they hit the nail on the head right there. Yeah. Is that like Santa Claus becomes this slippery slope of just not believing in anything that's unseeable, essentially. And that's why, like, interestingly enough, the last time I had this conversation with my entire family, meaning like my sisters and my brother-in-law, both of the women, Kathy and Christy, were very much into the idea of Santa Claus and keeping that alive. Like, they felt very passionately about that. And Steve and I were both sort of like, no, it's not something I would want to do just because, like, for the above aforementioned reasons. Like, it's essentially, you know, it's a fun lie, I guess, on some level, but like you're essentially like not just lying, but in a similar way to like how you were raised, you are messing with your child's reality, sort of.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing is like I am going to struggle, and I've talked about this with my therapist. I am going to struggle with the concept of like imaginative play when I have children.
Yeah, that's fair though.
Because I want them to have a healthy upbringing. And a healthy, you know, normal development. And I know that imaginative play is a huge part of that. Mm-hmm. So what's going to be hard for me is to distinguish like what is healthy and what I need to squash. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like something that I want to do research into, and I haven't really done a lot of it, but maybe this would be a good conversation for another time, would be like the concept of like imaginary friends.
Yeah.
So like how long do you entertain imaginary friends? Like how do you interact with that in a healthy way? Because I don't know if so this is just because it's me and I don't have a frame of reference. Like
all your friends were imaginary essentially at one point.
So my question is like, how did parents figure that out? Like have parents figured that out? Is there a way to do that in a healthy way? Like those are questions that I have.
See, I never had an imaginary friend, and I don't think my sisters did either. I mean, they could correct me on this whenever I see them next, but there was a lot of imaginative play for me growing up. Like I would put on a cape and take something that was supposed to be a sword and go out in the yard and like, I don't know, would you consider that to be imaginary friends? That was more like just play adventures. I didn't really have a friend.
Well, when you think of imaginative play, like that's kind of an umbrella thing, and then you've got imaginary friends under there, and then like your little adventures and stories that you would, because I did the same thing. Like I would go out with my little sword and fight monsters and stuff. Like
I think it's the best kind of, like when I was dating Michelle, like we would do imaginary play with the kids all the time, and it's something that like I think in a correct like way, stokes the imagination of kids. It's very fun. It's very entertaining. It's harder to do nowadays because there's so many other like video games and other distractions. But like I think that done correctly, it's the best thing you can do to stoke a kid's imagination and like their heart and soul, essentially.
I think maybe where it went wrong with us was the fact that it never was contained. Like my mom like would take our imaginations and say like that's real and like perpetuate the storyline, the narrative that we had come up with as kids, but to a point where like it wasn't like a, oh yeah, that's fun, and then we moved on and never talked about it again. Like it was a constant.
Well, your mom had a tenuous grasp on reality.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
To begin with,
so wild.
Yeah,
wild.
I think imaginative play, like it definitely, I would say I still was engaging in imaginative play until I was in 9th grade, probably. Because like that's about when Final Fantasy VIII came out, which was one of my favorites. And my parents had this weird garden hoe that was had a handle on the end of it that was sort of like a trigger. And so that was like my gun blade I would go out with.
Nice.
And that was probably, in fact, I accidentally chopped off the top of a pine sapling my mom had planted that never grew again after
oh my
that.
God.
And it wasn't a ton. Like, I took off like maybe a foot to a foot and a half of what was a 4.5 foot thing, but it just never came back again.
That's a fourth of the tree.
Yeah, my mom never forgave me for that.
That's a substantial part of the tree.
Yeah, the tree no longer exists because I know exactly where it was, and I haven't seen it in like 10 to 20 years. But
oh my god.
But yeah, that was about the end of imaginative play for me. But yeah, it was, I don't know, I think it's fun. I think it's what helped me become a creative person in general was just being able to lose yourself in a world and figure out what is going to happen next, sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I used to, when I was a kid, I wrote a lot of stories and, was very creative. And I feel like the imaginative play had a lot to do with that. But like I said, I think in a lot of ways, it wasn't properly developed in me.
Yeah, well, based on what you've told me about your mom bringing you up, the imaginative play replaced reality, essentially.
Exactly.
So you have a completely different frame of reference for this from almost anybody in the world, I would say. I mean, I'm sure there's hundreds to thousands of people who've been in similar situations, but out of billions of people, that's like...
Yeah, it's a small percentage, I'm sure.
Yeah, you lived Pan's Labyrinth, so...
I love that movie.
Me too.
I was trying to get Ryan to watch it, but he doesn't do subtitles, so I was like, all right.
Oh, he doesn't do subtitles?
No, yeah.
Oh.
I do subtitles because I can't hear for shit. Or I can't, I can hear, but I can't process what I'm hearing sometimes.
Yeah, well, that's actually why subtitles are such a big thing for me. I haven't seen this guy in a few years, but one of the guys who used to do a lot of movie stuff with us, Cameron, was born deaf, and he did have the cochlear implants, so like he could hear us and like communicate properly with everybody on set and everything like that. And he said he could hear movies just fine, but he preferred the subtitles because, like, it just was better for retaining the information and seeing what was going on.
I mean, it's like, if you are... I mean, I can imagine with having the implants, like, it's still kind of a skill that is not, like, second nature to him yet, because I can only imagine, like, it's hard enough for me to hear words sometimes and then try to understand, like, what they mean in the context of the conversation.
Yeah.
And especially my favorite part is when there's no conversation going on and someone starts a conversation with me. And oh my gosh, I can't tell you, I had someone on the phone with me last week. I answered the phone at work and I was like, hello. And they started talking and I didn't comprehend a word they said. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I need them to say it again. And I don't know how to tell them that I just am mentally ill.
That's kind of the best way I can describe, which this might be your case too, like how my hearing works, because my hearing is not great and will probably only get worse as I get older. But like on The Office, Nate Prolish's character, when he is like interviewing to be a like dock worker or a warehouse worker in like the 7th season, he's explaining to Dwight, like, so I don't technically have a hearing problem, but if I'm in a place with a lot of other noises, I can't discern from one noise for another. And then he repeats the same thing over and over again, not realizing he's repeating it, which is the joke. But I'm like, yeah, that's actually kind of how, which is like, if I ever was going out on a date or something like that, I usually would prefer a place where that had like, if there was a bar, if there's like a back area that's a little bit more quiet, I can hear you better. But I can't do like loud places because I can't hear you or hear what's going on. So
yeah, no, absolutely. So speaking of work, I actually got a new job.
You're not with Truist anymore.
No, I just put in my 2 weeks about. Someone is calling me, but they are going to have to wait.
Sorry, bud. This is podcast time.
Yeah,
so is this an applause situation, or is this like,
yeah?
Woo!
So this was actually a really interesting situation because first of all, I just kind of I got pissed off, so I was applying for jobs, and
that's how it happens. Actually, I've been there.
So I got the news on Thursday afternoon that I got the job, and it's literally the same job I'm doing that I was doing. It's just with a different bank, and I'm gonna get paid more. So yeah, that's pretty nice. So I kind of got to quit my job, but without consequences, which was really fun. Because the thing with banking is, if you leave for a local competitor, even if you give your notice, they they won't keep you because it's a conflict of interest, but they'll pay you through the rest of your notice. So I got to like call my boss and be like, hey, I got a job with the local competitor. And she was like, well, I guess turn in your keys. And so it was like all the good things about quitting a job without the uncertainty of having another job or anything else to do. So it was pretty, I feel really relaxed. I feel very, very nice.
Yeah, that's awesome, first off. So I'm glad that you're like getting a new job and it's going to be good stuff. I had a similar story to that actually when I went to work for a lottery, because I used to work for WITF very publicly. And again, won't say names, although anybody listening there will know who these people are. But the guy who was like my big boss there, one of the worst people I've ever worked under. Very, very clueless, very bad manager, just somebody who sort of got grandfathered into a high six-figure job at a public television station. And my job, like when I worked for WITF, I had to cobble together a couple of different jobs on my own to make it a full-time thing. Like I usually got like 20 to 28 hours a week managing lottery, although I would take any shifts available. So usually that was like sometimes at 32 hours a week. But then I would also be the transcriptionist. I would also do like freelance. If they wanted edit work, I would do that. I answered phone calls for the call-in thing. I also was a pledge supervisor a couple of times. So I had to like actually do work around work to ensure I was getting like 38 to 40 hours a week. And they started really cracking down on my hours for no particular reason. Like, it's a zero-sum game. Like, they would be paying somebody these hours anyway. But just sort of out of weird spite, because that's how this person operates, they were cutting back my hours on certain things. And, like, all the lottery people liked me, so they sort of floated the idea. It's like, hey, why don't you, put in for over here and work full-time without having to cobble hours together, double your salary, and actually get benefits. And so I did that, and I actually got offered the job, but like in true Hal form, because I did want to work in TV and film and all that. And like, so I actually went to this boss, and I was like, at that time, the then girlfriend and I were like trying to plan a future. That didn't work out, but and everything. And I was like, I kind of need more of a financial commitment here because you're cutting my hours. And his response was basically like, oh, you don't have any foot to like lead with here. Like, you have nothing to stand on. You'll take what I give you and you'll like it, kind of thing.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, well, I would like to put in my 2 weeks notice because I will be working for the lottery from now on. So I'll be your client. And that was the end of that conversation. And that was a very satisfying moment, but this guy has been an absolute dick to me since. Like, about a week before I was ending at WITF, my then girlfriend and I were going to a musical at Whitaker Center, and as we were walking downstairs, I ran into this guy and his wife, and I was just sort of like, hi, person, I said, just out of pure, like, politeness, and he stared me down, and then he's like, Hal's dead to me, and then walked away.
Did he say that out loud?
He did, and my
Holy
girlfriend
fuck.
was like, what the fuck was that? And I'm like, that is the worst person I've ever worked for, and
Oh
I
my
will not be.
God.
So, but it was very satisfying. Like, that's the only time I've ever been in a position where I had another job offer, which was significantly better. Like, I love my job. Like, again, it has the occasional irritations and occasional, like, things that you have to do just to ensure the show runs outside of normal work hours. But it's actually pretty awesome. It's always very interesting. I meet a lot of different people, and I really enjoy it. And the WITF side of it was kind of like working myself to death just to have the opportunity to work, sort of thing. It was like freelance, but being employed by a company, which was the worst thing. So that was a very satisfying, you can't fire me, I'm quitting for a better job kind of moment.
No, and I had a moment of panic because and it wasn't so much when I talked to the new bank that I'm working for, they said, we know from bringing other people over from where you currently work that like they probably won't keep you. And this is a standard among like banks.
Okay.
And they said, so it's up to you. Do you want to wait the full 2 weeks before starting here? Or do you want to like kind of adjust? Like, do you want to start Monday? Do you want to do X, Y, Z? And I said, well, I mean, I'm pretty sure they won't keep me, but I don't want to count on it. So, let's stick with the 2 weeks. And then I'll update you if they don't keep me, and then maybe I'll start a little earlier.
Okay.
And so I called my boss to give her my 2 weeks, and she was like, okay, well, let me call HR. I might be able to keep you for another week. And I was like, no, don't do that, please. But I couldn't.
Thank you. That's such a nice thing.
Oh my gosh, I was panicking because I was like, I am so over this was Thursday. I had been packed since Tuesday. and I didn't even know if I had the job yet. I was so convinced I was getting this job that like Tuesday morning I was packing up my desk. I was like, see ya, motherfuckers. So, and I mean, I was just like, I really don't know if I can stand another week here. And then she called me back and she was like, no, you're gonna have to turn in your keys. And I was like, fuck, thank God. I like did not want to deal with that. So, but the thing was like, if she had been able to keep me for another week, I couldn't have just been like, no, I don't want to do that, because they have to be the ones to release me so I can get paid.
Yeah.
But it worked out and I'm happy, and I'm only going to take off a week, and then I'm going to start the following Monday. So the 18th.
Very cool.
Yeah. So
yay.
Yeah.
Congratulations to Shannon.
Thank you.
For getting a new shiny job. Burp, burp.
Yeah. I was talking to my therapist about it, and I was like, a little over a year ago I got fired, which was probably one of the most devastating things to ever happen to me.
Yeah, I remember
in life.
It happened when we were shooting Crossing Paths, I remember, because you were talking about it at the Chinese restaurant when we were all taking a lunch break.
Yep. So it was devastating for me. I am very career focused, and I very much just like I'd never been fired before, and so like this was a huge crisis of confidence for me. And I've been struggling with it ever since. I'll be real, like it's definitely
probably in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
Like, if I ever get fired again, that's just like a huge fear. It's like
that fear of failure, and just wondering like, am I good enough? Does anything I've done up to this point matter? All the intrusive thoughts.
Well, here's an interesting thought. Do you think that this was sort of like getting the new job might have been like a reaction to how you felt at that point? Because maybe it was sort of like, somebody breaking up with somebody they think is going to break up with them so that they are in control of the loss or they can't get hurt, sort of thing.
So that could be it. So, and then we also have to think about the 6-month job I had in between banks. So.
Oh, yeah, the HR where you had to fire everybody.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is that the bank that I have been working for was kind of like a rebound bank. And it was like just getting me back on my feet. And I really feel like there's an opportunity walking into this role where I can actually feel like I'm going to kick ass and walk in with confidence. Whereas like when I walked into this past bank, I was like, okay, this is the first banking job since getting fired. Like, you have a lot to prove and blah, 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 blah. So I think there's a huge opportunity for me to be in a much healthier mindset walking into this job.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Like, and hopefully, ultimately, hopefully you don't have to ever get another new job. But like, if you do, it probably gets easier from job to job. So.
I'm sure. Well, and that's something that I was talking to Ryan about, because he had talked about, he was like, you haven't been with this bank for long, and the job before that, you weren't there long. Like, are you worried that you're kind of job hopping? And I was like, no, because my first adult jobs, I was with the first one for 4 years, the second one for 2, and the third one for 2. Then this whole like thing happened, and yes, these last 2 were shorter time frames than what I've done before. But I am really looking for a place that I can build a career and say, like, yeah, I've been there 10, 15, 20 years. Like, I want to find the place that I'm going to retire from. If I get to retire.
That's a thought I've had a couple of times, too, because at this point, I've been with Lottery for just, like, maybe a week shy of, actually, probably, like, just 3 or 4 days shy of 6.5 years. I've been on the Lottery side, which, if you include the WITF stuff, is actually closer to, like, 10 years almost. But like, I was thinking while I was taking my daily walk around the building the other day, I'm like, I wonder if this has gotten to the point where I have gone to work at this building more times than any other job, because like Hershey Park was probably the place I had gone to the most often before then, which was, a lot of days for 4 months a year, but then nothing else. And I kind of did the math, and the Lottery building edges out Hershey Park by quite a bit. But like, just you want to talk about like bouncing around from jobs. Like, when I was in California, the longest I stayed with a single company was like 1 year, 2 months or something. And then every other place it was like, oh, he did 3 weeks doing assistant story work at this company, 4 weeks of PA work at this next company. And which, for California, that's fine because that's just how resumes work there. But like, trying to find a job around here was a little bit more difficult. Like, I don't know if I ever told you how I got the job at WITF, but I sort of just started volunteering here. Because I moved back from California, and I had a lot of money because the production gods gifted me a very cushy job for like the last month and a half, I was out there working on a couple, like logging footage for a few movies and like real TV shows as opposed to reality shows. So I saved up like a couple of $1,000s, and I just sort of was able to float as I was living with my parents and just volunteer here until eventually I got a job like 4 or 5 months later.
Nice.
So, and then that led to the lottery job. So that kind of like I had the luxury of doing that because I was like, I had a lot of trouble finding like a real job after my resume had bounced around so much.
Yeah. Job searching is one of those things that like I don't love for sure.
No.
And the interview process for this job that I'm taking on was kind of a roller coaster of emotions for me because I had the phone screening. I thought it went well. Had the second interview and like nailed it, like absolutely crushed it. And then the third interview was scheduled for Tuesday, and it was only scheduled for 30 minutes. And so I was like, okay, well, 30 minutes isn't a long time. I'm thinking they're going to feel me out for 10, 15 minutes and then probably offer me the job. So I had like convinced myself that I was getting the offer on Tuesday.
Manifestation.
Well, the thing was like I was so confident I was cleaning up my desk, and I didn't get the offer on Tuesday.
Oh, no.
And so then I had all of my shit in a bag, and I was like, okay. So I put it in like a drawer, and I was like, okay, we're just gonna live out of the bag until we know for sure. And so 2 days later I get the call that I got the job, and so like I pulled out the bag and I like called my boss, and there was another partner that was in the building with us, and she was walking by my office, and I had just told her the news, and she was like, you're already packed up? I was like, bitch, I've been packed up since Tuesday. So that was a little, I mean, I did definitely set myself up for failure on that one. Just like overconfident, but it ended up being, you know, I got it.
It's definitely a sign when you're packing up your desk, because I was just thinking about like this is the opposite end of the spectrum, but like a coworker of mine got in some somewhat serious HR trouble back in February or March, and like after the HR call he got, like he sort of like, I don't even want to say passive aggressively, like mildly aggressively just packed up his entire desk into a box and took it to his car, which he's still technically with us, sort of, but you know, it just was weird that like he packed up his entire desk, and it's kind of weird because his desk is like, my desk is not always the cleanest, but when I get some downtime, I do like to like wipe it down and organize a lot of the clutter on my desk. And his desk is like a weird mix of completely messy, but also with stuff packed in a box in the corner. So I don't know how you read into that exactly,
yeah.
But
1 foot in, 1 foot out, maybe.
Yeah, but it was so super awkward because everybody the whole week was like,
is he gonna get?
Is he fired?
Yeah.
Is he quitting? Is what's going on here? He's packing up his desk, and I was like, I don't want to say anything until I hear anything, but like, you know, it could just be maybe he's cleaning things up. But then the fact that the rest of his desk was a mess was like weird.
Yeah. No, so yeah, some exciting things coming on. And so unintentionally, I am getting a week off, which is really nice. And it's also nice because like I was trying to decide, because like I said, technically I'm going to get paid through the next 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So I was like, do I start the new job right away and get double paid for 2 weeks? Or, you know, just take the time off and be grateful for some time off?
You know, this is actually exactly what happened with me with between WITF and the lottery. I had a week off, and I decided to take the week because I was like, I'm probably never going to get another week like this again.
Right.
But little did I never had vacation time at any job before then. So little did I know, I could have just started a week early, gotten double paid, and accrued more vacation time. Mm-hmm. But that's just not the way my world worked at that point.
Well, yeah. So that's why I kind of split it up. Instead of doing all or nothing for the 2 weeks, I was like, okay, I'll take 1 week off and then another week where technically I'll be paid double.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, that's kind of nice, and it'll be a little extra in my paycheck.
Give me double. Mm-mm.
Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty exciting, and it kind of like happened so quickly that like when it did happen, I was like, oh shit, now like I have to leave. Sure. And so I was like frantically trying to pull like last minute stuff together and trying to be like, oh shit, I got these clients that
oh shit.
But I think I wrapped everything up pretty solidly, and you know, I feel bad for my team, but you know, it's not my team anymore.
You know,
but
it's not like, here was an interesting thing too, like vis-a-vis the WITF stuff. Oh, excuse me.
Excusing Hal.
Yeah. So like, and I didn't realize this actually happened until another really good friend of mine at WITF, Katie, left like maybe a year or two after I left. And I heard from another friend of mine who was working in the same department as hers, like her department head like went ballistic when she left, and like specifically told everybody, similar to how my boss at WITF was, that she was dead to everybody there because she had left. And I noticed, too, like at this point, that this person in the head of that department had actually unfriended me at the same time. So, like, there was a weird, like, having your cake both ways at WITF where it was like, oh, we're not going to pay you the salary that you are asking for that you can actually have a life with. But because the mission of the station is so important, we're going to hate you for leaving at the same time, which is what they did with my friend here. And I was like, that is an incredibly toxic like way to do things. Like the work is important enough, but you don't deserve the same amount of, because also an interesting thing, if you look through the public registry, because public employees have to have for nonprofits have to have their salaries published, all of the top people there are making like in the hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Like, I remember I was shocked that my big boss, who didn't really contribute much of anything to any department, but had just been there forever, was pulling in $165,000 a year. I was like, what the actual fuck? Like, and I'm begging for $27,000 a year, essentially. Oof. Like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. Well, that's, that's one of the things that I was nervous that I wouldn't be able to get a different job because the bank that I worked for was paying more than most banks do. And so I was like, there's no way I'm going to get more than what I'm getting right now. And it ended up being that, and I was like throwing my resume at shit that I shouldn't have even been throwing my resume at, but I was like, fuck it, I don't care. And so I told myself, I'm like, I'm not leaving unless I'm making at least $10,000 more than what I was than I'm currently making.
Wow.
That was the benchmark, and I got the benchmark, and I was like, Jesus Christ.
You're rich.
Well, nah, not rich. I still have the wedding to finish paying for.
Yeah. And when you want to decide to buy a house, it's going to be astronomical at this point.
Yeah. I mean, the pay bump's going to help getting towards buying the house, but
yeah, Lauren just got a pay bump too, and she was saying that like, because she's been looking for an apartment around Harrisburg, and it's been very, very, very hard to find anything. Like, even Summers, who's a co-owner of the Improv Theater, who she and her husband always have properties for rent around Harrisburg. I reached out to her, and she says she has nothing, and she actually even has a waiting list of people like asking for housing. So like, oh, sorry.
We're accusing Halligan.
Yeah, but my mic was on this time when I was coughing. Anyway, Lauren was saying that the pay bump that she's getting, which is comparable to actually to the pay bump that you got, will help open up her apartment search quite a bit. So.
Yeah. So all good things around. But the thing was, before I got the news this week, I was in so much stress. I was, oh my God, I was like unable to do anything for like 2 days because I just was living in this limbo of like, do I do things but if I schedule things for like next week and then I get the job, I'm going to have to leave, and then those things for next week are going to have to be canceled, and that's just going to cause a bigger mess than me just not doing it. So yeah, I was kind of like, you need to do enough to keep your job, but also not too much that you will be hated by everyone.
That's a weird middle ground to be in, but I totally understand.
Yeah. No, it's totally good. But yeah, so now I unintentionally have a week off.
Woo.
And so I'll be focusing on...
Treat yourself.
Yeah. I'm going to, meet up with some people I haven't talked to in a while. Ryan's sister and I are going to go have breakfast together next week, which is really fun.
Come do stand-up on Thursday.
I almost came to stand-up this week, but when it's thunderstorming, I just want to curl up inside. I was like... No.
It was a really weird, again, it was my first time being out in public in about a month for various reasons, but Karen was the only woman the entire night.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, which I thought Kirsten was there for a little bit, but she plays poker mostly rather than doing stand-up anymore. So I didn't even notice Karen was the only woman until I think Damien mentioned it later in the night, and I'm like, oh yeah, she was the only woman this whole night. How typical.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, so we're planning on going to comedy this coming week. And by the way, one of the jokes I was going to make is that the breakfast that I'm having with Ryan's sister, his sister is also named Shannon, so I put it in my calendar, the
Weird.
breakfast of Shannons. And I think that's hilarious.
The gathering of Shannons.
Yeah. So that'll be fun. My bachelorette party is next weekend, and Ryan's bachelor party is next weekend.
Yeah, I still have to figure out a way to get off of work for that, too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Which I think I can. It's just a matter of like, because of the way our schedule goes, there's a lot of times where we don't see certain people for a while, and the person I need to ask hasn't been scheduled with me for a bit, but I'm pretty sure she'll swap with me. Somewhat complicating matters too is also we have somebody in our department who just won't work anymore, which is weird and awkward for everybody. But yeah, and it makes making plans significantly harder, but I think I'll be able to swing bachelor partying with Ryan. So.
Nice. Well, that'll be nice. Yeah. I heard it's going to be fun. Go-karts that go 55 miles an hour, I guess. I was like, dang, that's fast.
It is fast.
I would be very scared. I don't even do well in regular go-karts. So, yeah. But you guys have fun with that. And I'm also... And I guess there's axe throwing too, and I'm jack shit at that. So
I've done it one time. It was okay. So
Ryan was pretty decent at it. I think the one and only time. Well, we've done it twice.
What's the axe throwing place that he's going to, by the way?
It's the same place as the go-kart place. They do both.
Okay. Because I was gonna say 2 friends of mine from the Improv Theater had an axe throwing place in Mechanicsburg for a while. They had to move, but I think they reopened. And I was just wondering if it was the same place, which just sounds like it's not.
No, we went to a Christmas party last year where they had rented out a axe throwing like thing. Like they came and set up, and we all got to do axe throwing. And I was like, that's probably totally safe. And but they had somebody there. They had like people, like employees that were making sure we all followed the rules and all that kind of thing. So that was fun. And then the only other time I have thrown an axe was for his brother's gender reveal party for our nephew. They were doing axe throwing at these balloons, and whichever, you had, it was like a tic-tac-toe game. So if you got the 3 down, then it was like, oh, it's a boy. And it was. So yeah, that was pretty fun. Except I didn't hit shit. So
yeah, it's very hard. The last time I did axe throwing actually was a coworker of mine. Her husband is very much like a crafts kind of guy, and he built like a little axe throwing range in their yard. And I went to Easter there. This was like 5 years ago. And so I had trouble hitting pretty much anything with those particular axes, but it was still fun to throw weapons at people.
Not people.
Oh yeah,
a target.
How? You just revealed a Freudian slip.
What kind of fucking axe throwing are you going to? Is this the island of Dr. Moreau, or what are you doing?
I'm still engaging in imaginative play.
Oh, no, not the island of Dr. Moreau. I'm thinking of, what the fuck is it called? The Most Dangerous Game.
Oh, I don't know what that is. I do what the island of Dr. Moreau was.
Yeah, I got my classic weird rich men mixed up.
Well, the island of Dr. Moreau has like a... Have you ever heard some of the production stories for the remake that they did with Marlon Brando?
No, and I've actually never seen The Island of Dr. Moreau, but I want to.
I've never seen it either. It's not a good movie from what I hear, but like there are, if you're interested, look up the production stories. My favorite batshit production story on that thing is that they like, the original director had a weird vision and was an absolutely crazy human being, and they fired him. But they were filming like this remote place in the woods, and what he did was he somehow snuck back into the set, dressed as an animal, as an extra on set for like weeks, stalking his own former production.
That's amazing.
It is there. Like the whole movie is full of like weird stories like that. But
so, are there any moments where he's actually on screen in his animal?
That's
outfit?
a good question. I'll have to look that up. Val Kilmer in his documentary had a small part about the island of Dr. Moreau. Where he mostly just said that he didn't get along with whoever they replaced the director as, but he didn't really talk about the crazier things that happened on the set for that movie, because there were a ton of... Also, any movie with Marlon Brando in that period just had craziness going on.
Wow.
So there was one thing I wanted to talk about before we run out of time in 12 minutes, because we're on a truncated schedule today.
That's a big word.
So the last week I've been like... As I've been like on my thyroid medication and like things have been getting more back to feeling like a normal person again with correct energy levels and things, I've been amending my diet a lot more too. So I've been cooking more foods and things like that.
Ooh.
And I want to talk about the concept of like food addiction, because this is something like my ex had accused me of, because she never really like said things nicely several times. And I think that she might have had a little bit of a point in some way. And it's something I've been having to like... It's something that developed over like the last 3 or 4 years that I'm trying to disengage a little bit more from now. So I thought that was an interesting, like, it's kind of an addiction that like a lot of people don't necessarily talk about, but like we're all kind of wired to have it essentially, because every food is way too salty. So it doesn't like nourish you quite the same way. So you're just kind of looking more for constant dopamine rushes from food that you consume. Because I was reading a lot about this week, because this concept like suddenly became interesting to me as I was like preparing and cooking my own vegetables and chicken and things. And all of a sudden I feel significantly more nourished, full, and healthy than I did just eating out food and stuff like that. So that whole like concept is very interesting to me.
Yeah, definitely. I think that something that I struggle with, you had mentioned about like where we get our dopamine from, and like ADHD has a lot to do with a kind of imbalance of dopamine.
Yeah.
And so that's where I tend to struggle with staying consistent with healthy habits, because I'll get hyper focused on it and then I will just stop
and sounds very
do
familiar.
Something different. So like exercise, I'll be hyper focused on exercise for a week and then I get bored with it. I'm not getting the dopamine rush that I was, and so I switch to something else. And so maybe I switch from exercise to focusing on eating healthy, or I switch to some other activity that gives me dopamine to begin with, but then I get bored with it. And this is actually something that I've found has impacted Ryan and I's relationship in the sense of like our sex life, because there are long stretches of time where it's not like front of mind for me. I'm not hyper focused on it.
Yeah.
And then there will come like a week or two where I'm hyper focused on it, and I'm like, I want to make sure that I'm intimate and like sex and all that stuff. But then I'll go through the stretches of time where I'm just like, I'm not interested. And it's not that I'm, find him unattractive or anything like that. It's just the ADHD, like controlling where I'm getting my dopamine from.
I don't know if that's even ADHD. I think that's just maybe normal human sexual behavior, because like this is a discussion that like Lauren and I had a lot when we were first starting dating, is because I was like, yeah, I have a pretty strong sex drive and like enjoy sexual activity a lot, but it's very mood dependent for me. Like I'm not always going to be like, because this tends to be a bit of a stereotype with men, and it probably is fairly true like when you're an adolescent or something like that. But as you like settle into yourself a little bit more, like there are times where I don't feel like having sex at all, and I'm not like in that kind of a mood. So it's very much mood dependent, the same way for me that it is for most women, stereotypically as well. And it's something that people don't talk a lot about with men. In fact, this was a major problem with the previous relationship, was that like there would be a lot of resentment sometimes when, I was not in the mood for it whatsoever. And I think the thing I yelled at one point was like, I'm not a constant boner machine. Like, please, like this is not it was very like, I've got other stories about that I'm not going to put out into the public sphere. There are limits to what I will share on the Depression Vacation podcast.
There's boundaries on this thing?
Not boundaries, but just like, I'm not going to talk about some of that stuff in person. But just suffice to say, like there are a lot of lulls with sexual activity in general. Like, I mean, Lauren and I didn't see each other a lot this summer for most parts, just because like work was terrible for her, then work was terrible for me. So like we did go long stretches without like being intimate with each other. And then when I'd see her, like a lot of times, like it just wasn't the correct mood for it. So sometimes you just enjoy being around your partner and talking with, sharing and doing things. Like you don't always need to be engaged in sexual activity to feel close to something. But then it feels weird if you go a long time without it, regardless of what the like situation or the components are. Like it's this weird game. Like one of the things I think about is, did you ever watch the TV series Love on Netflix?
No.
It is a very interesting, somewhat uneven, but I think a really real like look at a modern relationship, but really how relationships always have been. It's with Paul Rust and Jillian Jacobs, and like they sort of just meet each other living and working in Los Angeles and have a lot of a relationship that's very real, because it's full of these problems, but it's also full of like ways that they don't discuss their problems. Like something that's always stuck with me is that like in the final season, Paul Rust is like kind of a stereotypical nice guy. Although they play around with that trope quite a bit too. And they go to a family reunion of his where his his mom gets drunk all the time because his dad is really mean, and like his brothers and sisters are kind of horrible to each other. And then he'll just always make jokes to try to diffuse the situation. And they talk about how like that's why he became like a writer and comedian, essentially. Was like he was always in situations where everybody was just mad at each other and angry, and the only way to diffuse it was to like distract everybody by becoming a comedian. And I thought that was a really like real thing. But back to what I was saying in general, like one of the sets of characters, another couple on the show, are clearly like having a slow breakup over the course of the last season. Like the woman is not satisfied with the guy because he's kind of a man-child and has a lot of issues he's not working on. And so she develops like a crush / an emotional like cheating relationship with another friend of his. And like the final thing that kind of kills their relationship is like she has a clog in her her shower, and she calls over the other guy to fix it, and her boyfriend shows up. And he can tell something's up, and he's like, we also haven't had sex with each other in a long time. So that's like a sign of like dwindling intimacy, essentially. So I don't think it's like a major problem, but I think if other problems arise and then you add that on top, it just becomes a backbreaker.
Right. I think a lot of people do get hung up on if the intimacy is in a lull, that they start to be like, oh my gosh, am I falling out of love with this person? Is our relationship dying out? And I think that, when you look at it on its own, you have to look at the context that it's in for sure.
And you want to you don't want to be like somebody who demands sex all the time or things like that, because that's so 1950s. But like I think there's a middle ground too. Like I hear this happens a ton with partners after like births, for instance, because like if I was a woman and my body was ravaged by pregnancy, I probably wouldn't want to have sex that much for a while either. It's like, look what you did to me this one time we did it. But then like there is a component of it that like there is like, aside from just like if a man is like hypersexual or something like that, there is an intimacy component to it where like you're missing out on something, I think, if you're not engaging whatsoever. It's real. I mean, again, stating the obvious, I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist, so this is just my own thoughts on it. And like it's all very, like everything in the human sphere, especially the sexual sphere, it's very complicated. So.
Yeah. All right. Where are we at? We probably need to start wrapping up.
Yeah, we have about 4 minutes left.
Okay. What you got going on?
So I don't have too much going on. I've got 2 improv shows, but none. Actually, I guess it would be this week. This week, Friday at the Harrisburg Improv Theater at 9 p.m., I'll be part of the Bonfire Society, which is a harmonic convergence team, which sounds really cool, but it just means we have 2 different sets of characters that engage in their own scenes and then get closer and closer and closer until they meet at the end, and that's the end of the show. Yeah. And then I've got the musical group the week after. But I feel like I've said these every single week the last few weeks.
No, that's okay. We got to remind the people.
Yeah, VidJam is coming up too, which is the big deal. I'm recruiting lots of people to be part of that, and I think it's going to be lots of fun. It's going to be a ton of work, so
I'm excited.
I've been scrounging for props as well. I went through a Salvation Army a couple of days ago and found jack shit that would have been interesting.
Yeah.
Or like was too similar to a prop that I got last year. Although they're reissuing a prop this year that I had 3 years ago that was a very prominent prop. Like a security surveillance camera.
Oh, cool.
Which was actually the prop for one of my favorite VidJam movies I've ever made. And I don't know how I feel about the fact that it's being reissued.
Yeah.
I mean, on one hand, you can see somebody do something different with it. But on the other hand, it's like, man, I already made an awesome movie with this. What the fuck are you trying to do here?
Well, if I see anything, I'll let you know. If I see anything interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, nothing will beat the doll from... You heard that story, right? From last year?
Oh, yeah.
Did you?
I think so.
Oh,
no.
I don't think you heard this because you would have remembered. So last year when I was going through, this was community aid off of 322. One of the things I found was like a creepy porcelain doll that somebody had like donated, and it got issued to my friend Katrina's team. And Katrina is a professional like cleaner and organizer, and she was actually cleaning out a house of an Alzheimer's patient of hers that either they just had passed away or they were going to assisted living. The doll was part of the stuff that she donated to community aid.
Oh, wow.
So she was the one who packed that up, the creepy doll from her client's house, dropped it off at community aid, and then was issued the same prop for horror VidJam. That's fucking terrifying.
That should have been the VidJam.
Exactly. Like that was, they did a fun movie, but
yeah. That's cool. So I'm excited for horror VidJam. Looking forward to what you got coming up with that. Well, I'm going to help you with a horror VidJam.
Oh, yeah.
And then I have one show in October coming up. October 21st. It's in Millersburg. It's the Monster Mash comedy show being put together by Sarah Cartwright.
Yeah, Sarah.
So you'll be seeing me as Link telling Legend of Zelda jokes.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned that last week. That sounds really cool.
And hoping that they're not too, I hope there are video game people there. So we'll see.
That kind of reminds me of, like, as a quick aside, like, they always tell us in improv to be careful with that kind of humor because it's so specific that, like, if an audience member doesn't get it, like, that's how Critical Hit, which was our Dungeons and Dragons team, started, was just a sort of nerd prov. And we actually ran into that problem in our own practice scenes where, like, somebody didn't get the reference somebody was making and would try to play along, but it just would wreck that. Like, I didn't know who the Wonder Twins were when we were doing a show at one point. And so I just had to, like, play along with, like, whatever the scene partner was doing.
Yeah. So we'll see. I might chicken out and, like, go for something a little more generic, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, anyway, everybody, thank you all for listening to. This was the shortest episode we've done of this. It's going to clock in just an hour in a long time after Suji took up an hour and a half of our time last week.
Well, you know, we got shit to do. It's a Saturday. It's kind of nice outside.
Some of us have to go to work.
Some of us have to go to work. I don't, because I got a week off.
Well, anyway, thank you all for listening. We'll be back next week. I think we're going to have Sam Melville on next week to discuss the ins and outs of Horror Vid Jam for anybody interested. But until then, I've been Hal.
I've been Shannon.
And this has been Depression Vacation Podcast. Thank you all and have a wonderful week.